Zok the Mishnah. We're on Daf Samach Tes Samach Beis. This is another Mishnah which is going to discuss the halach of bittul rishus. If someone forgot to make an Erev Chatzeres, so you have to make bittul rishus. This is going to go until the next Mishnah on Daf Ayin Aleph. The first section of this Perek is mostly discussing this halach of bittul rishus. Zok the Mishnah Anshe Chatzer sheshachach echad mehem v'lo yirev beisei. So you have people of a Chatzer, and one of them did not include himself. He forgot to be included in the Erev Chatzeres. So aser melahachnes and melahaitzi loy v'lehem. He is not allowed to see. And what did he do instead of, if he did not participate in the Erev Chatzeres, so he was mevatel his reshus to them. So if he's mevatel his reshus to them, he can't carry out from his house into the Chatzer. And the people of the Chatzer also can't carry out from his house. But from their house, he was mevatel his reshus to them. From their house, they can carry out into the Chatzer, and he could also carry out from their house into the Chatzer. As the Gemara will explain why. Nasnu loy reshuson. What happens if it's the opposite? There's one person that forgot to make a Erev Chatzeres. Other people did make a Erev Chatzeres, but this guy that didn't make a Erev Chatzeres, he needs to be able to carry out into this Chatzer. So everybody else was mevatel their reshus to him. Okay, so then the halacha is, nasnu loy reshusan, they gave him, the person that did not make the Erev, their reshus, hu mutter, so he's allowed to carry out from his house, v'hein asurin, and they're not allowed to carry out from their house. And Rashi adds, when it says hein asurin, it also means that they're not allowed to carry out even from his house. Okay? The point is very simple. The one that you mevatel your reshus to him, so he has now the only ownership in the Chatzer, and he's the only rights in the Chatzer. He could carry. The person that was mevatel the reshus, he doesn't have any rights in the Chatzer, so he can't carry there. How about if it's two people that forgot to make an Erev Chatzeres? So now, oisrin zeh zeh. So they're going to answer on one another. If everyone is going to be mevatel their reshus to two people, but there's still two people there in the Chatzer, why does bittul reshus work? The fundamental point for this Mishnah and for the rest of the Gemara is bittul reshus always works because after you mevatel reshus to this one person, there's not only one person that has rights in the Chatzer. If as long as two people have rights in the Chatzer, you still have a problem of carrying from the house into the Chatzer. The whole basis of the Isser is that the house is owned by one person and the Chatzer is owned, there's a possession of the Chatzer of two people. That's a problem. Bittul reshus is that there's now only one person that has rights in the Chatzer. Okay, so what happens if you have two people that did not make a Erev Chatzeres? So then, even if you're going to be mevatel to them, one asks on the other. She'echad noisen reshus. So the halacha is as follows. If you have only one person that did not make a Erev, she'echad, then he's noisen reshus. He could be mevatel as reshus to other people in the Chatzer. V'neitel reshus. Or they could be mevatel their reshus to him. Either way, there's going to end up being only one the rights of only one individual in the Chatzer. Either the one person that did not make an Erev Chatzeres, or the other people that did make an Erev Chatzeres, they're all like one person. Shnayim, but if you have two people that did not make an Erev Chatzeres, Neisnin Reshus, two people, they could be mevatel their Reshus to everybody else in the Chatzer, but ve'ei neitlin Reshus. If the other people in the Chatzer want to be mevatel their Reshus to them, it's still going to be two people that have rights in the Chatzer, so that's a problem. Again, so that's the basic point of here. If two people have rights in the Chatzer after the bittul reshus, so then you still can't carry. If only one person has rights in the Chatzer through the bittul reshus, then you could carry.
If they're from the same family, husband and wife?
No, that's not two people. That's not two people. It has to be from two different houses. Now, when does the bittul reshus have to get done? Before Shabbos, on Shabbos? So Beishamai says bittul reshus has to be done before Shabbos. Why? Because Beishamai apparently holds, we had this discussion once before, Beishamai holds that bittul reshus is a form of a kinyan, even though you don't actually make a kinyan, but still it's a me'ein a kinyan, and therefore that can't be done on Shabbos. Beis Hillel says mishechashecha. A bittul reshus can be done even on Shabbos itself, as we had already a few times before in the Gemara, that this way obviously we paskin that it can be done on Shabbos. A person that was mevatel his reshus to other people in the Chatzer. But then, he went and he carried out his things into the Chatzer. bein b'shoigig, bein b'mezid, whether he carried it out b'shoigig or b'mezid. Hareza Eiser. So by carrying out, he just undid the bittul rishus. The idea of bittul rishus is that I don't have any rights in the chutzner. I'm removing myself from this chutzner. But now he carried out. So now he's removing his whole bittul rishus. Divrei Rab Meir. Rab Meir says no difference if it's shoigig or mezid. Rab Yehuda says b'mezid, if he intentionally carried things out in the chutzner, Eiser. So then he's directly going and undoing his bittul rishus. B'shoigig, if it only happened b'shoigig, eina Eiser. He does not undo his bittul rishus. The Gemara quoted this before. The Gemara explained this machlekes already before. Okay, now the Gemara goes back to the beginning of the Mishnah. What did it say in the beginning of the Mishnah? A person that makes bittul rishus, so he removes himself from the chotzer, and he's not allowed to so he's not allowed to bring things into the chotzer. The other people are allowed to carry in the chotzer. And what else did it say in the Mishnah? Okay, so the Gemara is going to be medayik. Let's see. Beisoi huda aser. So his house, it's aser to carry in. The house of the person that was mevatel, it's aser to carry in. Ha chatzeiroi sharia. But the other people of the chatzer are allowed to carry in his house. They're allowed to bring things into. Again, what? Again, Beis Hayuda Aser let's start again. Beis Hayuda Aser, from his house, they're not allowed to carry in. Ha Chatzeiroi Sharia, but from the Chatzer, in the Chatzer that is, they're allowed to carry in it. So the question is, Hey Chidami, how exactly does this bittul rishus work? I the batal Beisai, if when a person is mevatel rishus, so he's mevatel the rishus of his house, so then amai aser. Why are they not allowed to carry from his house into the chutzner? He's giving up his rights in his house as well. At this point, the Gemara understands that when a person gives up his rights, either he gives up his rights in the house that he lives in and in the chutzner together, or he doesn't give up his rights to neither. The Gemara doesn't see a reason to distinguish between them. A person says, I give up my rights in this place. Either it includes both the house and the chutzner, or it doesn't. So if he was mevatel his rights in his house, so then, either batal, if he gave up his rights, and it includes his house as well, amai also, why can't they carry out from his house? Either loy batal, elamai, you're going to say he did not give up his rights, chatzeirei amai sharia. So why are they allowed to carry in the chutzner? Answers the Gemara, hacha b'mai yaskinon, kagayin shebitul rishus chatzeirei. He was mevatel his rights in the chutzner, but v'loy bitul rishus beisa. He was not mevatel the rights in his house. The kasavri rabbanon. The rabbanon hold hamavatl rishus chatzeiroi rishus beisoi loy bittul. When a person says, "I give up my rights in the chotzer," he's only giving up his rights in the chotzer, not his rights in the house. Why? The diet inish bebayis beloy chotzer. A person could live in his house without a chotzer. So he gave up his rights in the chotzer, but he's not giving up his rights in his house. In his house, he's still living. He has no chotzer to use for his house. It doesn't matter. We had this a few times before in the Gemara, if you remember. And the Gemara there brings another opinion. Rashi over here quotes it, Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says, if a person gives up his rights in the chotzer, by definition that means that he's giving up his rights in his house as well. And he's only living in his house as a guest. Because you can't live in a house without a chotzer. Right? So if a person says, I give up my rights in the chotzer, so then the other people are allowed to carry in the chotzer and in his house. The Rabbanan in this Mishnah, however, hold, no. If you said you're giving up your rights in the chotzer, that doesn't mean you're giving up your rights in your house. A person could live in a house without a chotzer. That's the pshat in the first chelik of the Mishnah. Then what did it say in the Mishnah? V'shalahen muter loy v'lahen. The other people in the chotzer, you can carry out from their house into the chotzer. And even this person that was mavatel his rishos, he's also allowed to carry out from their house into the chotzer. My time, why? When he comes to carry out from their house, he's like a guest. He's coming into their house like a guest. He can't carry out from his own house into the chotzer because he gave up his rights to use the chotzer. But if he's carrying from their house into the chotzer, so then he's like a guest by them, and that he's allowed to do. Sagt the Gemara weiter. Then what did it say?
About the rishus from his house. His house doesn't become like everyone else's property. When
he's not being mevatel the rishus in his house. That's what
that he is mevatel.
If he's befeidish mevatel the rishus of his house, yeah. So then his house becomes
that he can carry from his house.
L'chayra as a guest, as the guest of everyone else. Yeah, l'chayra. Yeah. Okay.
So like he doesn't need the chapil.
The next thing it said in the Mishnah was nasnu loy rishuson. If everybody else in the chotzer, was mevatel their rishus. They made an erev chatzeris together, but they were mevatel now their rights to this one person, who mutter, so he's allowed to carry out from his house. V'hein asurin, they gave up their rights and they're not allowed to carry out from his house, and they're also not allowed to carry out from their own house. V'hein asurin, from their own house. Again, they're obviously not allowed to carry out from their own house because they gave up their rights from their house, and they're also not allowed to carry out from his house. Just like he said that he's allowed to carry out from their house when he's mevatel rishus, because he's like a guest in their house. Why don't I say the opposite? That they're allowed to carry out from his house and they're like guests by him. And says the Gemara, Chad legabe chamisha hava oirech. One for 5 people is considered to be like a guest. Chamisha legabe chad lehava oirchen. To say that all the other people of the chotzer, that they're like guests in his house, that I don't say. So therefore, then they can't be like guests in his house, and therefore they can't carry out. Shma mino. Now the Gemara goes back and says, if you look in the Mishnah, if you read the Mishnah as one long statement, so what is the Mishnah saying? He was mevatel the rishus to them, that was one scenario, and then the Mishnah said the opposite scenario. They were mevatel the rishus to him. So at this point the Gemara understood that it all happened on the same Shabbos. So Shma mino. If so, we can learn from our Mishnah, mevatlin v'chayzrin mevatlin, that when you do bittul rishus on Shabbos, so you can do bittul rishus half a Shabbos, one person is mevatel rishus, and then the other half of Shabbos, the other person can be mevatel his rishus back to you. This was a machlokes before in the Gemara between Rav and Shmuel, whether you could do this. So the Gemara says, no, it's not a raya. Hachi ka'amar. The pshat of the Mishnah is it's 2 different cases. Nasnu loy rishusan me'ikara. The case where it says that they were mevatel rishustim, it's not on the same Shabbos. It's talking about a different case, a different Shabbos. In the beginning, not that he was mevatel to them, they were mevatel to him. So then, hu mutta v'hein asurin. It's not talking about in the same Shabbos that he was mevatel to them and then they were mevatel to him. Weiter it said in the Mishnah, ha yushnayim oisrim zeh al zeh. If you mevatel the rishos, but what happened over here is everyone made a nerech chatzeris and 2 people are left out. So if 2 people are left out, it's not going to help to be mevatel rishos to them because you still have 2 people that have rights in the chatzer. So how does the bittul rishos help? Fragt the Gemara, pshit, isn't this obvious? Why does the Mishnah have to teach this to me? If it's 2 people, so then it's also like it was in the beginning. Answers the Gemara, lo tzriche the hodar chad minayu batalei lechavrei. What happened was, so let's say you have 7 people in the chatzah. So 5 of them made an erev chatzeris. 2 did not. Those 5 were now mevatel their rishus to these 2 people. But it's still 2 people that have rights in the chatzah. It's a problem. But now these 2 people, after everyone was mevatel their rishus to them, one was mevatel his rishus to another. Mao the teimer lishteri. So I would think that it should be mutter, because everyone was mevatel their rishus to 2 people, and then one was mevatel to his friend. So now at the end, there's only one person that has rights in this chatzah. So you should be able to carry. Kamash Malan, that's the chiddush of the Mishnah here. The kivin, the beidne, the bottle, loy havre le sharyusa. At the time when the 5 people in the beginning were mevatel their rishus to these 2 people, did their bittul take effect? Did their bittul accomplish anything? No, it didn't accomplish anything. If the bittul doesn't accomplish anything, it can't take effect. Rashi here explains this whole takana of being mevatel rishus without a kinyan is a chiddush at chachamim or masakin. It only takes effect if b'shas you're being mevatel rishus, it does something, it accomplishes something. When everyone was mevatel their rishus to 2 people, it didn't accomplish anything. It's still 2 people that have rights in this chatzah and you can't carry. So if at that point it didn't accomplish anything, so then it doesn't do anything. So therefore, it doesn't take effect. You can't say that you're going to make a bittul, and at that point the bittul doesn't take effect, and then this person has to make a second bittul, and then it'll take effect. The first bittul never took effect if at that point it was worthless. That's the chiddush of the Mishnah. Then the Mishnah says weiter, when the Mishnah over here says sort of a klal, the Mishnah says, Echad noisen rishos. One person is allowed to be mevatel rishos to another person. So this is also obvious. Fragt the Gemara, Hasu lamali. Why does the Mishnah have to say this? Is it telling me that one person could be mevatel rishos? Tanina, it said it in the beginning of the Mishnah. Is it telling me that you could be mevatel rishos to one person? He could take the rishos of others. Tanina, it also said it in the beginning of the Mishnah. So why is it telling me here that one person could be mevatel rishos? Says the Gemara, you're right, Yitaka don't need this. Seife itzrichalei, the main chiddush is when you get to what it says afterwards, that shnayim noisnin rishos, that two people could be mevatel rishos to the other people in the Chatzar that made an Erev Chatzeris. Shnayim noisnin rishos, that was the chiddush. Fragt the Gemara, ha nami pshita, this is also obvious. Why can't two people be mevatel rishos to the other people that already made an Erev in the Chatzar? At the end, what happens? There's going to be only one person that has rights in the Chatzar. Those people together that made already an Erev Chatzeris. So it's pashut that you can do this. What's the problem? Mao de Taime says the Gemara, because I would think ligzar dilmem asi levituli lahu. I should be geyser that maybe if you're going to allow it to be done in this direction, that two people are going to be mevatel to one person, or to people that made an Erev Chatzeris, they may do it the opposite direction. They may be mevatel to two people, and that doesn't work. So maybe the Chachamim made a gzeira that two people should never be able to be mevatel verishos. We don't want people to confuse and do it in the opposite direction, which is not allowed. Kamash Malon, that was the chiddush of the Mishnah, that we don't make such a gzeira. Weiter it said in the Mishnah, ve'ein noitlin rishos, that two people cannot take the bittul rishos from anybody else. Why not? Because if two people take the bittul rishos, it's still two people that have rights in the chatzah, so it doesn't work. Fragt the Gemara, lamali, why does it have to say this? It already said before, shnayim oisrim zeh al zeh. So why does it have to say again, ve'ein noitlim rishos? Answers the Gemara, loy tzricha. You know when you need this K, why the Mishnah is saying this? Afal gav the omri lei kni al menas lahaknois. Even if those people that are coming to be mevatel rishos to two people, they are saying kni al menas lahaknes. What does kni al menas lahaknes mean? It's when I'm selling you something and I tell you I'm selling you something on the condition that you're going to sell it to someone else. So over here, what did we say? The people that are coming to be mevatel rishus to two people, it doesn't work. It doesn't take effect b'chlal. Because this bittul rishus still allows for two people that have possession here. But what's if they said b'feidish, we're only being mevatel rishus to you two on the condition that one of you is going to then sell your part to the other one person. So if you say b'feidish kni al menas lahaknois, so maybe then it should take effect. So that's the chiddush over here, that when you're mevatel to two people, even if you say kni al menas lahaknois, it still does not take effect. You can never be mevatel rishos to two people. Now, this is a more very general question, benegay to the concept of bittul rishos. We had this came up once before, benegay to bittul rishos. So this is a very close to the geshaila. You have 5 people that are living in a chatzar achas, and one chatzar. And one of them forgot to make an erev. So he's going to be mevatel his rishos to the others. When he's mevatel his rishos to the other people in the chatzar. Does he have to be mevatel his rishus to every single person? Does he have to go to every single one of them and say, I'm mevatel my rishus to you and to you and to you? Or he doesn't have to go to every single one of them. It's enough if he goes and he's mevatel rishus to one person, and then they could all carry. That's the shaila. So actually this is brought in Shulchan Aruch. Let's first see the psak halacha. Amalei tzarech levatel l'chol echad ve'echad. When you mevatel rishus, you have to be mevatel to every single one of them. They all made an Erev Chatzeris together, but it's not enough to be mevatel rishus to just one of them. You have to be mevatel your rishus to all of them individually. L'chol echad ve'echad. But the way this is brought in Shulchan Aruch, there's 2 days about this. One day is kipshutay, that you have to go to each one of the people that made an Erev Chatzeris, and you were left out, and you have to tell each one of them, I'm mevatel to you and to you and to you. But another day there in Shulchan Aruch is that you just have to say kulchem. If you mevatel the rishus, you can't just say I'm mevatel rishus b'loshen yachid to one of them. If you say kulchem, so you don't have to go individually to every single one of them. Okay, so that's the psak din that Rabbi said. You have to be mevatel rishus to all of them. So the Gemara here is going to bring a braisa, a question on this. Eisvei, we learned in the braisa, echad shaloi irev, one person that was not included in an Erev Chatzeres. So what kind of case are we talking about? So if you look into Rashi, echad shaloi irev, Rashi says we're talking about a case Kagoin Gimel Diyurin B'Chotzer. There are 3 people here living in the Chotzer. So one person was not included in the Erev, and the other 2 did make an Erev Chatzeris together. So what do? So Nais and Rishusai le'echad she'iriv. So this one person that did not make the Erev Chatzeris, so he's mevatel his Rishos to one person that did make an Erev Chatzeris. So right over here, in this first line of the Braisa, it's a question on what we just said. It doesn't say in the Braisa that this one person has to be mevatel his Rishos to the 2 people that did make an Erev Chatzeris. It says you're mevatel your Rishos le'echad she'iriv, to just one person. That's the Shaila. But the Gemara here is going to bring the whole Hemshech of the Braisa, and the Gemara is going to discuss later the whole Hemshech of the Braisa, and there's about a total of 6 cases over here that the Braisa brings. And there's going to be 3 cases where the Braisa is going to say that the Bittul Rishus works, and 3 cases where the Braisa is going to say that the Bittul Rishus does not work. And the fundamental point that you have to keep in mind to understand what it says in this Braisa is Bittul Rishus always works. Is if in the end of your Bittul Rishos, there's only one person that has rights in the Chatzar. If after you do the Bittul Rishos, there's more than one person that has rights in the Chatzar, then your Bittul Rishos doesn't do anything. Let's see. So the next case here is, so we said Echad Shlei Iriv Noisin Rishusei LeEchad She'iriv. Now Shnayim She'irvum. What happens if you have 2 people that made an Erev Chatzeris? Noisnin Rishuson le'echad shalei iriv. There's one person that was left out. They can give over. They can be mevatel their rishos to one person that did not make an erev chatzeris. When they finish doing that, there's only one person that has rights in the chatzah, so it's good. Takes effect. Shnayim shalei irvu. 2 people that did not make an erev chatzeris. Noisnin Rishuson l'shnayim she'irvu. They can be mevatel their rishos to 2 people that made an erev chatzeris. Those 2 people that made an erev chatzeris are like one entity now. So again, it takes effect. Or they can give over the rishos to one person that didn't make an erev, because now there's only one person that has rights in the chatzar. That's the common denominator of all of these cases. When you finished making your bittul rishos, there's one person that has rights in the chatzar. Aval, but then here are the cases where your bittul rishos will not work. Ein echad she'iriv, noisen rishusay le'echad shaloi iriv. In a case where you had 3 people in the chatzar, let's go back to what Rashi said before. You had 3 people in the chatzar here, right? So you have one person that made an Erev Chatzeris, and then you have 2 people that did not make an Erev Chatzeris. So you can't go, this person that made the Erev Chatzeris cannot go and give over Bittul Rishos to one person that did not make an Erev, because there's still 2 people that have rights in the Chatzar. Doesn't take effect. Ve'ein shnayim she'irvu noisnin rishusam l'shnayim shelo yirvu. 2 people that did not make an Erev cannot give over their rights to 2 people that did not make an Erev. 2 people that did not make an 2 people that did not make an Erev cannot give over to 2 people that did not make an Erev. Huh?
Same case.
No, it's not the same case. No, before in the previous case it was Shnayim She'irvu. I said Shnayim Shelo Yirvu. Okay, so in the previous case it was 2 people that made an Erev, so they can't give over to 2 people that did not make an Erev. Ve'ein shnayim she'irvu noisen rishusam l'shnayim shelo yirvu. And if nobody made an erev, ve'ein shnayim shelo yirvu noisen rishusam l'shnayim shelo yirvu. Because again, the point here is that in the end, it's going to be a possession, it's going to be a rights of 2 people in the chatzar. It doesn't take effect. L'chayre, all of these cases that it says here in the Mishnah is obvious. It's a pasha to point, and the Mishnah is just the Braisa that is repeating it in different scenarios. In the Hemshech of the Gemara, it will explain what the chiddush of each one of these cases is. But what's the point that the Gemara now wants to learn out from here regarding what Rabbi said? Katana miyis reisha. In the first case of the Braisa, what does it say? Echad shalei iriv. One person did not make an erev chatzeris. Noisen rishusay leechad she'iriv. He has to be mevatel his rishos just to one person. He doesn't have to be mevatel his rishos to both of the people that did not make an erev. Hey Chidami, what are we talking about over here? If there's only 2 people in this chat, there's no other person here, so one person is being mevatel to one more person. Bahadi man iriv. With whom did this other person make an erev chatzeris with? You're saying that the person that did not make an erev, the person that did not make an erev is being mevatel to the person that did make an erev. Who did he make an erev with? So it must be that there's a 3rd person here, as Rashi said in the beginning. That person made an erev with someone else. Vikatani, what does it say in the Braisa? Le'echad she'iriv. You're only mevatel to one person. You don't have to be mevatel to both of those people. So Rabbi said you have to be mevatel to every single person. So how could it be? And says Rabbe answers, Hocha b'maya skinon. You know what it's talking about over here? The have umis. There was another person here that you made an Eid of Chatzeris with, but he's not here anymore. He died. He's not here anymore, so now you're mevatel to just one person. And Rashi here explains that it's talking about a case that he died and there's no Yodesh. There's no other person that's living there. Okay, Rashi says it's in a case where they're, let's say, in a valley. It's not a case where they're in a chutzner, where there's a house and he owns a house and there's a Yodesh there in the house. There's no Yodesh, so now there's only one person left. That's what the Braisa said, you're mevatel to only one person.
What is it, ger?
That's Taisus. Taisus says that it could be talking about a case of a ger that has no Yodesh. But Rashi says it's talking about people that were stuck in the middle of a way outside somewhere and they put up a fence in a valley and no one has an ownership in this place. So when one person dies, there's no one there to yashin anything. Frag the Gemara, if that's what we're talking about, that this person died, I have umis, aim is sefer. What does it say in the sefer of this Braisa? Avol ein echad she'irev, noisin reshusai le'echad sheloi irev. One person that made an Eirov cannot be mevatel his reshus to the person that did not make an Eirov. Why not? Why can't he be mevatel his reshus to the person that did not make an Eirov? Because there's another person with him. And then there's still two people left over after you mevatel your reshus. V'i dahave omes, but if you're saying that the other person died, amayloi, why can't you make a Eid of Chatzeris with the person? Why can't you be mevatel reshus to the person that did not make an Eid of Chatzeris? There's no one else here. The other person died. The isay. So you're going to have to say the pshat over here is that there is another person. There are two people that did not make an Eid of Chatzeris here. With the Sefer the isay. So if in the Sefer it's talking about that there are two people here and the other person did not die, Reisha nabi the isay. So in the Reisha also, it's talking about a case when you're being mevatel to a person that made an Eid of Chatzeris and there's someone else with him and he did not die. So the Gemara says, Lav Dafke. Midi area, is this a proof? Ha kedisa, ha kedisa. The Reisha is talking about a case where you're being mevatel to a person that made an Eid of Chatzeris, and the other person that's there along with him died. And the Sefer it's talking about you being mevatel to another person that did not make an Eid of Chatzeris, and there's someone else along with him and he did not die. Two different cases. Okay, now it seems to be a shtickle adeichik to say that two different parts of the Braisa is talking about two different cases. But Rabbi says, Teda, I'll bring you a raya to what I said, that you always have to be mevatel to everybody. It's not enough to be mevatel to one person. In the last case of the Reisha, the Gemara now is dividing the Reisha and the Sefer. The Reisha talks about the cases where the bittul reshus takes effect, and the Sefer talks about the cases where it does not take effect. So the last case of the first section of the Braisa, where it discusses the cases where it does take effect, what does it say? Shnayim sheloi irvu. Two people did not make Eid of Chatzeris. Neisnin reshuson l'shnayim sheirvu. They have to give over. They have to be mevatel their reshus to both people that made the Eid of. So what do you see here? L'shnayim in. They have to be mevatel to both of them. Le'echad loy. It's not enough if they're mevatel to just one of them. So this is exactly what Rabbi said. You have to be mevatel to both of them. Abaye that disagrees with Rabbi. Abaye says, Maila Shnayim, Maila Beis, when it says you have to be mevatel to both of them, it doesn't mean you have to be mevatel to both of them. Le'echad mi Beis. It meant to say that you have to be mevatel to one of the two. And then it would work. Ihachi, so the Gemara says, so why doesn't it say that? Listni le'echad she'iriv. Let it say that you've been mevatel to one of them that made the Erev, or le'echad shelo yiriv. Or you being mevatel to one that did not make an Erev. Kasha. That taka remains a question. It said in the Braisa Befedish, l'shnayim, that you have to be mevatel to shnayim. According to Abaye, why does it say you have to be mevatel to shnayim? You only have to be mevatel to one of them. Okay, so Bekitzer, if you look at this Braisa, from one part of the Braisa, it seems to be a raya to Rabba, and Rabba answered no, the case is that the other person that was there died. And in the other part of the Braisa, it says you have to be mevatel to both of them. It seems to be a raya to Rabba, and the Gemara Taka remains with a question on Abaye's Shitta. Now, the Gemara is going to come back to this Braisa. The Gemara is going to go through this Braisa case by case, and there are 6 cases here in this Braisa. And as I pointed out, when we learned it, it doesn't seem to be any chiddush in all the cases of the Braisa. The point of the Braisa is all one point. As long as when you finish doing your bittul reshus, you're giving it over to one person that has ownership in the chatzah, so it's good. If there's more than one person that has rights in the chatzah, so then it's not good. Why does the Braisa go through all these cases? So let's start in the beginning. Echad shelo yirev, one person did not make an erev chatzeres. Noisin reshusay leechad she'erev. He gives always mevatel his reshus to a person that made an erev. What's the chiddush in this case? La Abaye, according to Abaye, the chiddush is the isay. There are two people here that made an erev chatzeres. Again, there's two people. Yeah, there are two people that made an erev chatzeres. The kamash melon. What's the chiddush of the brayse? The ein tzarich levatel reshus l'chol echad ve'echad. The chiddush is that when you do bittul reshus, you don't have to be mevatel reshus to everybody. It's enough to be mevatel reshus to just one of them. That's according to Abaye. LeRabbe, what's the chiddush in this case of the brayse according to Rabbe? The have umis. Rabbe says the case here is that there was another person but he died. The chiddush is v'loigam zrinan zimnin de isay. We're not going to be geyser that in such a case the bittul reshus shouldn't work because of a case where the other person that the erev chatzeres was made with is still alive, and then you might come to do the bittul reshus not to both of them. So the chiddush is that you don't make such a gzeira. The next case of the brayse, shnayim she'irvu, two people made an erev chatzeres, noisen reshusan le'echad, shelo yirev. They can give over the bittul reshus to one person that did not make an erev. What's the chiddush here? Pshita. Mao the time I would think Kivin the loy irev, since he did not make an erev chatzeres, liknase. Maybe he should have, there should be a knas that we shouldn't allow the people that made the erev chatzeres to be mevatel their reshus to the person that did not make the erev chatzeres. So maybe there's a knas. So in other words, what the Gemara is suggesting now is maybe there'd be a svara to say the person that was left out of the erev chatzeres, he could be mevatel to the people that did make an erev chatzeres. But the people that did make an erev chatzeres, they should be mevatel to this person that did not make an erev chatzeres. Maybe there should be a knas. Kamash malon, that's the chiddush that there's no knas. Shnayim shaloi irvu. The next case in the brayse was two people that did not make an erev chatzeres. Noisnin reshuson l'shnayim she'irvu. They could be mevatel their reshus to two that did make an erev chatzeres. What's the chiddush in this case? It's also pashut. If they made an erev chatzeres together, so then there's going to be only the rights of one entity in the chatzer. So the Gemara says, LeRabbe, according to Rabbe, the chiddush here is Tones Seife Legluya Areisha. This case is clarifying Pshat and the Reisha. What's it clarifying? That whenever you do Bittul Reshus, you have to be mevatel to both of them, like Rabbe's Shitta. La Abaye, according to Abaye, what's the chiddush over here? Shnayim Shaloi Irvu Itzrichelei. The chiddush over here is that two people that did not make an erev chatzeres, that they could do bittul reshus. What's the chiddush? Sol kedai tachamine ligzar dilme asi levitule luhu. Maybe there would be a gzeira, which is what the Gemara brought up at the beginning of this amud. Maybe there'd be a gzeira that two people that didn't make an erev chatzeres, you could never do bittul reshus. They could never be mevatel to anybody. Why? Because you should be geyser if you're going to allow them to be mevatel to the other two that made an erev chatzeres. You might forget and do it in the opposite, that they'll be mevatel to them that did not make the erev chatzeres. Maybe I should make such a gzeira. Kamash malan, that we don't make such a gzeira. The next case it said in the first part of the brayse, where it talks about the cases where the bittul reshus takes effect. This is the last case. Oy le'echad shaloi irev. You could be mevatel reshus to a person that did not make an erev chatzeres. Lomali, why does it have to say this case? It's also pashut. Mao the time I would think to say the entire concept of bittul reshus is only in a case where some of them made an erev chatzeres and some of them did not make an erev chatzeres. So then we say that there's an union of bittul reshus. Aval heiche the kulan loy irvu. If it's a case that nobody made any erev likne sinu, maybe in such a case there's a knas that you can't make bittul reshus. If nobody made a bittul reshus, no one made an erev chatzeres, that is, maybe there would be a knas that chachamim don't allow to use bittul reshus, and why not? Kidei shaloi tishtakach teires erev. In order not to forget about the whole union of erev. If they're going to rely on bittul reshus, you'll never make an erev chatzeres. Kamash malan. That's why it says this case of here le'echad shaloi erev, that even a person that did not make an erev, you can be mevatel to him to teach me this additional thing, that even if nobody made an erev chatzeres, you can still rely on bittul reshus on Shabbos. Now we go to the next section of the brayse. In the second section of the brayse, it talks about all of the cases where the bittul reshus does not take effect. And the basic point is because when you finish doing the bittul reshus, there are two people that have rights in the chatzar. So the Gemara goes through all the cases. What's the chiddush? Aval ein echad she'irev noisen reshusay le'echad shelo yirev. What's the chiddush of this case? Le'abaye tana seife legluye reisha. The Seife, this case, the Chiddush is to clarify Pshat and the Reisha. What is it clarifying? That we're talking about a case where there are two people that are here. Not like Rabbi said that in the Reisha one person died and in the Seife he's still alive. No, from the Seife you see that the second person is still alive. So the Seife is Megala Pshat and the Reisha. Le Rabbi, according to Rabbi, there's no Chiddush in this case. I did the Tana Reisha, Tana Nami Seife. Because this case was brought up in the Reisha, so similar, it brings in the opposite, the case in the Seife, even though there's no Chiddush here. The next case in this Seife was Ve'ein Shnayim She'irvu Neisnin Rishusan L'Shnayim Shaloi Irvu. What's the Chiddush in this case? Ha Su Lamali. Why is this case necessary to say? It's obvious that they can't give over the Rishus to two people. As is the Gemara, this is the point that we already learned before. Leitzrichet, the Chiddush here is the Batalei Chad Minayu L'Chavrei. After the two that made an Eirov gave over their Rishus to the two that did not make an Eirov, one of them was Mevatel to his friend. Mao de Teme Lishtarile. So I would think, after he was Mevatel his Rishus to his friend, so now there's only one right in the Chatzar of one person, so it should work. Kamash Malan, the Chiddush here is Kivin de Beidne de Batel Loy Havile Shar Yusuf Baha Chatzar Loy. When the original Bittul Rishus took place to these two people, it didn't accomplish anything, so it can't take effect. So therefore, even if one is going to afterwards try to be Mevatel to his friend, he has nothing to be Mevatel for. The whole original Bittul did not take effect. The next case it said in the Braise, Ve'ein Shnayim Shaloi Irvu. This is the last case. Two people that did not make a native cannot be mevatel noisen reshusam l'shnayim shelo yirvu, to two people that did not make an erev chatzeris. So hasu lamali, what's the chiddush of this case? Tzriche, the case over here is the chiddush over here is the omri kni almanas lahaknois. When the two people are being mevatel to another two people, they clearly said we're being mevatel to you two on the condition that one of you is going to give over the reshus to the other one. So I would think that maybe then it should take effect, because in the end there will be only one person that has ownership over here. That's the chiddush, that you can't have a secondary bittul reshus. Only if the original bittul reshus takes effect does it work, not if they make a condition that he's going to now be mevatel to his friend.
You couldn't learn that out from the Fidica one? From the You couldn't learn out...
The last case from the previous case? No, maybe, no.
Two things.
How could you learn it out from there? No. So, but maybe if they said befedish kni al manas lahaknais, maybe it would work. You have to have another case to tell me, even if they said kni al manas lahaknais, it still doesn't work. Which is a chiddush. It's not so posh why it doesn't work. They made him a shliach. They're telling him kni al manas lahaknais. So why? It's not a real kinyan. The whole thing, right?
If it was a real kinyan,
so then l'chayre it would work. By a regular kinyan, you can make him a shliach to be makna to someone else. Yeah. Yeah. It's a takanas chazal without a kinyan. The Gemara now goes to a different shaila. Boy minei Rav Merav Nachman. A new shaila. Yairish ma'oshi yivatl rishos. What happens in a case when you have a yairish? So what are we talking about over here? So there was one person that was not included. As I took a look at Rashi. Rashi says one person was not included in the Eid of Chatzeris, and he also wasn't mevatl the rishos. Right? And then Shabbos came in, and now the question is, could the yairish be mevatl rishos on Shabbos? He didn't even own anything. When Shabbos came in, he didn't own anything in the Chatzar. But now on Shabbos, could this Yairish do Bitl Rishus or not? So the Gemara explains what's the basis of the Shaila. Why not? So should we say as follows? Hey, Esmail, an individual that has the ability to make an Eidov from yesterday, Matzi Ma'arif. He's also, he can make an Eidov, because he can make an Eidov, so there, an Eidov Shabbos that is, Betuli Nami Matzi Mevatel. He's the individual that Chazal said he could also do Bitl Rishus when Shabbos comes in. Aval Hai, this Yairish, given the Iboy Eiruvin Esmail, if he would want to make an Eidov Chatzeris from yesterday, Matzi Ma'arif, if he can't make an Eidov Chatzeris, he wasn't even had any ownership yesterday. His father was still alive. So therefore on Shabbos he also can't be mevatel. Or maybe there's a svara to say Yairish kare de avuahu. The Yairish takes the place of the father, and therefore just like the father has the ability to be mevatel rishus on Shabbos, the same thing also with the Yairish could do bittul rishus on Shabbos. Okay, so that's the shaila. What's the halach of a Yairish? Amalei ani mevatel. I say that a Yairish could be mevatel rishus. So this is Rav Nachman. Right, and that's Hari the Beis Shmuel Tanu, the ones the Talmidim by Shmuel, they argued and they said mevatel, that a Yairish cannot make a bittul rishus on Shabbos, since he couldn't make an Erev Chatzeris before Shabbos, he cannot make a bittul rishus on Shabbos. Eisvei, so the Gemara asks a shaila from a braisa, Zeh klal, it says in the braisa the following klal, and this is a klal regarding Erev Chatzeris. Kol shemutel miktzas Shabbos, hutel l'chol Shabbos. If you made an Erev Chatzeris and for part of the Shabbos it took effect, it takes effect for the rest of Shabbos. The chol shenesel miktzas Shabbos. If there was a case that there was an isser for part of Shabbos, nesel l'chol Shabbos. The isser will take effect for the rest of Shabbos as well. The Gemara it's soon going to spell out what the cases are. Chutz mimevatel rishus. Bittul rishus is a chiddush that even though part of the Shabbos it was also to carry in this chotzer, but if then one person goes and is mevatel rishus to the others, so then it changes the status of the chotzer and you can carry even in the middle of Shabbos. Now, what are the cases here? Kol shehutel miktzas Shabbos mutel l'chol Shabbos. It was mutter in the beginning of Shabbos, so that heter remains throughout Shabbos. The chiddush is kagoin irev derech haPesach. You made an erev chatzeris between two chatzeris, relying on the fact that there's an opening, there's a doorway between them, and then in the middle of Shabbos v'nistam haPesach. That doorway was closed up. Erev derech haloin. You made an erev between two chatzeris, and there was a window that was connecting them. Then, therefore, you can make an erev chatzeris between them. V'nistam haloin. It was closed up. But still, once there was a heter in the beginning of Shabbos, that heter remains, even though the opening between them was closed up. Zeh haklal, and then the Braisa uses the expression of zeh haklal. Lasuye mai. What is that? Lasuye. What is that coming to add? Lasuye mavoy shenitlu koiraisav eilechyav. Going back to what we learned in the beginning of the Masechta, when you have to have a lechi or a kaira at the opening of a mavoi, if you had a lechi and a kaira there at the beginning of Shabbos, even if it fell down in the middle of Shabbos, once it's mutter in the beginning of Shabbos, the heta stays for the entire Shabbos. Then, the next part of the Braisa, kol shenesal miktzas Shabbos, nesal l'chol Shabbos kula. If there was an isser that started in the beginning of Shabbos, that isser remains for the entire Shabbos. What is this case? Kaga in shnei batim b'shnei tzidei reshus harabim. You had two houses on two opposite sides of a reshus harabim, so you can't make an erev chatzeris between them. There's a reshus harabim between. V'hikifum nachri mechitze b'Shabbos. Goyim in the middle of Shabbos came and put up a wall to create a chatzah between these two houses. You can't make an erev chatzeris in the middle of Shabbos, or you can't even do bittul reshus in the middle of Shabbos. Erev chatzeris, it's obvious you can't, but you can't do bittul reshus in the middle of Shabbos because it began being aser. Zeh haklal lasuye mai. What is zeh haklal coming to add? Lasuye meis nachri b'Shabbos. A case where a goy died in the middle of Shabbos. When there's a goy in the chatzah, what's the halacha? The goy prevents the yidden of making an erev chatzeris. What happens if the goy died in the middle of Shabbos? The Tana of this Braisa holds if the goy died in the middle of Shabbos, the issa remains. We had before in the Gemara a discussion about this. If a goy died, and that you could make a bittul reshus. Okay, but over here this Braisa holds that it remains asa. Then, what does it say? What's the last thing it says in the Braisa? V'katani chutz mimevatl reshus. There's only one exception where an isser at the beginning of Shabbos could be undone. What's that? Mevatl reshus. So the Gemara says, it says, chutz only this case. So it's mashma ihu in. Only the person himself that was living there from the beginning of Shabbos, he could do bittul reshus in the middle of Shabbos. Yairish, loy. But if he died, and then his Yairish wants to do bittul reshus in the middle of Shabbos, you can't. Because the Braisa says, chutz, this is the only case. So the Gemara says, no, not necessarily. Eime chutz mitayras bittul reshus. The chutz is that the idea, the concept of bittul reshus is something that you could change the status of the chutzah in the middle of Shabbos. Not only the person himself, but even a Yairish. Okay, so there's no raya from here. We're going to learn one more Eisvei, just to conclude this Amud over here. Eisvei, we learned in another Braisa, Echad b'bnei chatzah shemeis, a person from the chatzah that died in the middle, that died, v'niach reshus le'echad min hashuk, and he leaves his reshus, then who yarshins it, another person that's not living there, another person that's in the shuk. If he died during the day, so then Oyser, this person from the shuk, is going to aser on the people that are living here in the chatzah. Even though he's not living in the chatzah, so Rashi says, this Braisa over here holds, this person from the shuk has ownership now in this house from before Shabbos. He has to be included in the Eid of Chatzeris. If the person that died on Shabbos, then Eina Iser. It doesn't aser on anybody else. This goes back to what we just learned, because once there's a heter for part of Shabbos, there's a heter for the entire Shabbos. The Echad min hashuk shemeis. What happens if someone from the shuk that dies? In other words, this person was not here in the chatzar. He wasn't living inside the chatzar, and he dies before he dies. V'hiniach reshusay leechad mibnei chatzar. And now there's someone that's living in the chatzar that's going to inherit his house, his place in the chatzar. So if he died from before Shabbos, ein iser. So he's not going to aser on the people of the chatzah, because this person that's living there, that inherits his place, is going to be included in the Erev Chatzeris. Misha chashecha, but if this person dies on Shabbos, and there's now another person living in the chatzah that takes his place, oiser, he's going to aser on everybody else, because he is not included in the Erev Chatzeris. Amai oiser, but why does he aser on everybody else? Libatul, let him be mevatel rishos as a Yairish. Now he yarshins this person's place in the middle of Shabbos. Let him do bittul rishos in the middle of Shabbos. So l'chayre we see that a Yairish cannot do bittul rishos. Says the Gemara, my oiser nami diktani achi yevatel. The pshat of oiser is not that he can't do bittul rishos. Oiser means until he does bittul rishos. But once he does bittul rishos, he could be mevatel rishos. Even a Yairish could be mevatel rishos in the middle of Shabbos.